Hello everyone and welcome to the video, What are angles? In this video we will be discussing the standard 4G1, that is 4th grade geometry first standard. Well, what does that mean? In that standard it talks about the different types of lines and angles. In the previous videos we talked about lines, rays, line segments, parallel lines, and perpendicular lines. We also talked about what a point is, the basics of all geometry. This video we will be discussing the most complex part of this 4G1 standard, and we will be discussing what are lines. In the following 3 videos we will break down each different types of angles: the acute angle, the right angle, and the obtuse angle. But as for just this video today, we will be discussing what are angles and what makes up an angle. Also, we will discuss how to name an angle. That is just as important as knowing what makes up an angle. So let's get to the main question. Again, what is an angle? Well, an angle is made up of 2 rays that share an endpoint. It is made up of 2 rays that share an endpoint. In our previous video, we talked about what is a ray. A ray is a figure, a type of line, a type of line that has one endpoint and one arrow. That was our short. It has an endpoint, and then in one direction, the line goes forever and ever and ever and ever, okay? So this is a ray. Well, an angle has 2 of them. So it has 2 rays that share an endpoint. Which one is the endpoint? Here. So in an angle, it shares this endpoint. That means it will not have 2 endpoints. However, it just has 1. So an angle looks something like this. So what do I mean when I say it has 2 rays? Well, if we cover up this one, here's your first ray. You have one endpoint, and then it goes forever in this direction. And then here's your second ray. You have one endpoint, and it goes in the other direction forever. So when we put them together, they share this endpoint. This is the endpoint. Also, we call this a vertex. When you're talking about angles, it's called a vertex, or the corner, or the point, okay? There are many different terms for it, but vertex, endpoint, okay, are the ones that you need to know the most. So, sorry, I keep switching. Now let's talk about, now that we know what an angle is, let's briefly talk about how to name an angle. So if I was to call, if each point on this angle has a letter, when I go to name it, just like we talked about naming an angle array, just like we talked about naming an array or a line segment or a line, you use the letters, and then above it you draw a little line or array or a segment. Here it's just a little different. To name this, it's an angle. So you will start with just a little angle, okay? And then you will start with either side of the arrow. It doesn't really matter which one you do. There's 2 ways of naming it. However, you do need to know that here, this should always be in the middle. You cannot start an angle with the vertex. So let's start with this. This is C. The vertex is in the middle, so it has to stay in the middle. And it ends with T. So we're going to call this angle cat. Can I have another name for it? What if you start here? Is that okay? It is. Angle T A C. Tat. So it doesn't really matter which direction you choose to name your angle as long as your vertex is in the middle. As long as right here, the vertex, your endpoint, your vertex is here, it has to be in the middle. The other two, the direction really doesn't matter as far as the other two letters, but this is very, very, very important. And this will be commonly used throughout your acute, your right, and your obtuse angle. I will be using both ways so you know that either direction, whether you name from here to here or here to here, doesn't matter as long as this stays the same. So join me on the next video where we talk about what is an acute.